Silicon Valley: technology, art, green, and sustainability.
Welcome to another episode of Silicon Valley Tech, Art, Green, and Sustainability. Today I'm really honored to have two gentlemen with me that were at Maker Faire this last week, and I love Maker Faire. We've been going for many years. John Allwine, correct? And David Gatti,
correct.
Both from two companies that are branched out of technology, and Freakin Sweet Apps, correct?
Yep.
And InVitro.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and so before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself, John.
Myself.
Or John, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a software developer. I've been programming since I was a kid, and I always enjoyed doing visual type programming. Like I wasn't.
So you say since you were a kid, so since you were like 10.
Sixth
12,
grade is when I
sixth grade.
started.
So you're like 11, something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. I was never really good at painting or drawing, but I was good at math and physics and programming, and I really liked to put things up on the screen. I never really thought of it as art at the time, but that's what I did. I made games, I made simulations like fireworks displays on the screen, balls bouncing around, and the interest in that led to majoring in computer science in college. I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and focusing on 3D graphics programming. Took as many classes as I could, and from there.
You worked in the film industry too?
Yeah, so after college I got a job at DreamWorks Animation as a visual effects artist, and I worked there for a few years. And after that I decided, well, I was living in the Bay Area. My wife and I wanted to change of scenery, so we decided to move to Bozeman, Montana. I left DreamWorks.
Which has got to be a big change. Bay Area to Montana.
Very big change.
Weather change, lifestyle change.
Yeah, and we were looking for that. It was like the weather here is generally the same year round, and we'd never really experienced a winter like with snow. And so I was making this big change by quitting my job. So it was like, let's have an adventure.
And cost of living too. If you're a young family, it's got to be a little bit better too, living.
Yeah, it's definitely cheaper there. So not having extra income from my job made it a little easier. But yeah, so then I started my own company, Freakin Sweet Apps,
Cool.
just so I could dabble in app development. I stumbled upon 3D printing, and that just brought my my visual kind of programming to the next level. I could program something and then actually print it out into the real world, which was really cool.
Cool. We're going to come back to that in a second. And then David, tell us about you. So where are you from originally?
Yeah, originally it's like pretty hard to say, but so my story is long. It's like I was born in Sweden.
Okay.
I was raised in Italy.
Okay.
I lived in Poland for 18 years.
Okay.
Then I decided to leave Europe, travel a little bit. So I landed in Bali, where I was trying to also do some software development on my own. But basically, I started as a IT guy for 4 years. Then I transitioned to being a web developer, and from that I became a brand manager, crazy enough. And then I became a marketing director, and then I became a developer relation person.
Okay.
Because when I was in marketing, we at the previous company wanted to have someone that can speak with developers, but also know a little bit of marketing and branding and all that stuff, so can combine everything
So
together.
you need to be a little techie, but you also have to have a
Exactly.
little bit of language skills with folks.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And so that took a long time to find someone for that position. And since I was had this mix of technical and marketing skills, we decided that it will be easier to replace me instead of finding someone for that position. So that's why I transitioned to that title. And I did that for 1 year, and then I moved to Bali, And then I found a job here at InVitro because they were looking for a developer relation person.
So tell us about InVitro. I'm going to pull up the first slide here too, which is also, we can pull that down, which is also what we have right here, right?
Correct. So this is our board that we are actually like producing. And this board allows you to, when you connect it to any drone that you want, it allows you to write applications for the drone itself. So it doesn't matter which drone do you choose, doesn't matter which flight controller do you choose. Once you attach this little guy, which is basically a XB, it's made by a different company. So we're just using them to wirelessly communicate with the drone through the computer or a smartphone. And basically, you can write application for on the PC, on the Mac, for Arduino, and also for Android. Right, and the idea was like to bring simplicity to drone software development, because right now, with what you have on the market, takes like months or even years to build. Where with us, you can have a prototype working in 2 weeks.
Wow!
So it's like we're cutting the time and money to create something by a big number.
Let's bring up another slide too. I think this one's probably one from your booth this weekend.
Correct.
Yep. And you got a kid dabbling there, and let's go ahead and bring the next slide up here too. You can see there's a different type of drone there.
Yeah, so that's why when I said doesn't matter.
Is that you?
No, that's not me. It's funny, like it's the second time someone says, "Oh, is it your brother or this is you?" It's
Put the hat on, you can't.
Yeah.
You can pull that down. So
the idea is like to show that we can connect to different drones. It doesn't actually matter. So you can start your project with something small, and once you finish, the prototype is working, then you can switch to something way bigger. And once you switch the drone itself, the code that you wrote, it remains the same. You don't have to do any changes. So that's also the big advantage of our platform. We are not locking down people or companies to just a specific drone. You choose whatever you want.
So the technology is like, the hobbyist has gotten so big now with the drone technology, and we were talking a little bit ago about the FAA's rules they're coming up with, hobby versus professional. So building your own drone has become so big, and you know, it's a huge section now with the Maker Faire and other places. So the technology is changing so fast. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, or?
So yeah, like that's why like right now the technology is becoming more and more popular because it's getting way cheaper. So you can now buy a set for $250 and you can build it yourself fairly easily. The harder part is like actually flying it manually. It's pretty hard to learn. But because of that, also companies are starting to look into drone technologies to see what can you build with a drone? What type of like application can you have? Like the most common one is like farming, but people want to use drones in, for example, warehouses where you can scan barcodes and do the inventory. Like basically every night update the inventory. You can try to save lives when people are drowning by throwing life vests that that inflate in the water. So there is very interesting ideas around there that people are trying to make.
We can pull the next slide up too. I think the next one's from, so I grabbed a couple off the web. The top one I think is actually an Amazon one. You just don't have the logo there. Yeah. So there's the package delivery, and we can pull that back down. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to explode more. I mean, instead of seeing kites at parks, we're going to see lots of drones, I think, this summer. John, you want to tell us about your company now too?
Yeah, so my latest project is called Freakin Sweet Knots, and it started because I had a knot tying hobby. My dad tied knots all his life, and he asked me originally to write a program that could generate instructions for how to tie knots. So it started by me generating these kinds of pictures like this.
I don't know if we can get a close-up of that.
This originally laid out flat, and just because of the configuration, it allows it to fold up into a cube. And this guy right here is the actual tied version of it.
That's really cool.
And then I went from this to representing them in 3D. That was partially how I got the job at DreamWorks Animation, actually. And when I was preparing to propose to my wife, I decided I wanted to tie her ring out of wire. So this is a case that we put together of all my trial runs. Some just turned out terrible, but
so these were just the tests?
Yeah, these were just tests. I'd never worked with wire. I'd only really worked with string. So I was getting a feel for the wire. I was experimenting with different wire thicknesses.
So this one here, he's got a close-up of it right now. That's one of the test ones.
Yeah, so that's one with twisted wire and non-twisted wire.
And this is something you handmade?
Handmade.
Okay.
And so I was tying ring after ring, which took hours per ring, and all I was really doing was testing one little change, different wire thickness, different weave pattern, twisted versus non-twisted. And being an effects artist and a programmer, it occurred to me that it'd be nice to have software on the computer that could visualize this change before committing to several hours of work, just to say, okay, I don't really like that.
Yeah, this looks like it probably took you months to do all that.
Yeah, so I was doing that for months.